Good evening. This is Forum Daily for Thursday, July 7th. I'm Julie Stautland filling in for Nima Rajan. Tonight, we start with a meeting of the Group of 20. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly and other G20 ministers are gathering in Bali, Indonesia for talks that are expected to be dominated by the conflict in Ukraine. That's even though the official agenda for tomorrow's meeting is focused on global cooperation, food, and energy security. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will also be attending the summit. Today also saw a big announcement coming from number 10 Downing Street in the UK. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced he's stepping down immediately as leader of the UK's Conservative Party, but he will stay on as PM until a successor is chosen. Many in the party want him gone before then, but Mr. Johnson says the timetable for that process will be announced next week. Meanwhile, Russian forces continue their war in Ukraine, though at least for now on a more reduced scale. The Washington-based Institute for the Study of War says Russia may be temporarily easing its offensive in eastern Ukraine. This, as its military tries to reassemble its forces for a significant and potentially decisive offensive. The think tank says Russian forces did not claim or assess territorial gains in Ukraine yesterday for the first time in 133 days of war. That may suggest Moscow may be taking an operational pause. And Russia's defense minister issued a statement today that seems to confirm that assessment, saying military units have been given time to rest. Turning to developments in the legal situation facing American basketball star Brittany Griner. Russian news agencies report that Ms. Griner has pleaded guilty to drug possession and smuggling, but says she had no intention of committing a crime. Reports quote her as saying that she was packing in a hurry and made a mistake. Ms. Griner was detained at an airport in Moscow in February after vape canisters with cannabis oil were allegedly found in her luggage. And in a legal matter closer to home, former Conservative leadership candidate Patrick Brown has hired lawyers Marie Henin and Alex Smith to try to appeal the party's decision to disqualify him from the race. They contend that the party's refusal to provide details about allegations of violations of the federal election financing law indicates that Mr. Brown didn't participate in misconduct. Mr. Brown is accusing the party of mishandling the matter to try and stack the odds in favor of his main rival, Pierre Poilievre. Air Canada is enacting a drastic change in their pet policy as it works to improve the efficiency of its operations. The airline has announced that it will not be taking any new requests for pets to travel in the baggage hold of its planes until mid-September. This due to longer than usual delays. The move follows reports of pets being left in carriers among baggage for several hours. Quebec Public Health Director Dr. Luc Boileau says the province is in a seventh wave of COVID-19, but he doesn't plan to reimpose mask mandates on public transit or other restrictions. Health Minister Christian Dubé says the situation remains under control, but he is urging people to be careful. Officials are recommending people get their booster shots and plan to publish a chart today to offer guidance on the best timing. Moving from COVID-19 to monkeypox. The World Health Organization is reporting confirmed monkeypox cases worldwide have jumped 77% in the past week to 6,027. Cases have been reported in 59 countries, but most are in Europe and Africa. The UN Health Agency is concerned about the scale and spread of the virus, which continues to mainly affect men who have had sex with men. The agency says other population groups show no signs of sustained transmission. Meanwhile, Indigenous artists say a flood of fakes and commercial knockoffs produced in Asia and Eastern Europe are exploiting their culture and robbing them of revenue. Senator Patricia Bouvet, the first art historian to sit in the Senate, wants the government to help Indigenous artists enforce copyright law to stop the trade in fake works ranging from plastic bowls to bags and clothing. She would like to see a unit set up to help Indigenous artists track down anyone infringing on their copyright so they could at least get paid. The greatest outdoor show on earth opens tomorrow. The Calgary Stampede is returning to full capacity for the first time since the pandemic hit. The 10-day celebration of cowboy life was canceled for the first time in its 112-year history in 2020 and went with a scaled-down version last year. Actor Kevin Costner is the marshal for tomorrow morning's Stampede Parade. Up next, a look at investing in an uncertain market. Stay with us. Canada is headed toward a recession in 2023, but it is likely to be short-lived and not as severe as prior downturns, according to a new report from RBC. Royal Bank of Canada economists say soaring food and energy prices, rising interest rates, and ongoing labor shortages will push the economy into a moderate contraction next year. The report adds that household spending that accelerated out of the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns will slow as higher prices, interest rates, and unemployment will hit households. RBC also expects house prices to fall 10% in the year ahead, subtracting over $800 billion from household net worth. Amid difficult and uncertain times, knowing if you should invest or buy a house could be confusing. With us now to give us his perspective on how to proceed is Mr. Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Ltd. Welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you, Julie. Great to be here.
I have to start with the uncertainty of the market. Is there a perfect time to invest?
Yes, now, whatever now is, the ever-present now.
Okay.
Because to wait until the perfect time never comes. The market will either be ever too high or too low. So doing something now, if one has done nothing, do something, that just makes doing the next thing just that much easier.
Any advice on how to deal with inflation?
Well, let me just, how does one say this nicely, tear apart everything RBC had to say that you did in your little introduction. There's no way on earth they know that whether it's going to be short-lived or moderate. And if you rattled off all the things that I think are going up, food prices, energy prices, the price of getting your dog walked, I don't know, everything you said was going up. It sounds more like the makings of a revolution than it does short and moderate recession. So I'm a little bit, more than a little bit skeptical of the precision with which economists predict the future and RBC's predictions about our present future, if that makes any sense in particular.
So tell me, is it even worth investing in a house?
Oh, yeah. Well, first off, is it worth living in a house? I think that's the first question people have to ask themselves. If you want to live in a house, by all means, live in a house. If you can have the means, I highly recommend it, as the great Chicago philosopher Ferris Bueller once said. So get a house if that's where you want to live. Buy a condo if that's where you want to live. Figure out where you want to live first. And then secondarily, yes, it can be an investment. And over the next however long you live there, 5, 10, 15 years, it'll probably be worth more than what you pay for it, especially in the bigger cities in Canada, where people are still going to be coming by the hundreds of thousands from everywhere, because compared to Canada, the rest of the world kind of sucks.
Well, how should a young person, before they start thinking about investing in the market?
How young? People should start thinking about investment in the market probably no later than their first real paycheck. Now, some young people, and we've got accounts in trust for their parents for a number of young people where they're interested in particular stocks. They want to do this, and we talk to them about it and help them out from a very young age, late or mid-teens, even early teens. So there's nothing wrong with that. But by the time you get your first paycheck, you should be thinking about putting some money away on a regular basis, even if it's only $50 or $100 a month.
So what are the ways that I can start investing in order to be able to retire at 50? Or how much do I need to start? Let's ask that a common question that people want to know.
Well, you still have a good 20 years left, but if you're asking me how to invest so that you can retire at 50, you're clearly asking the wrong person, because I'm 52. So whatever I was doing clearly wasn't right. I would think if you're a young person, I would have a more fundamental question. What do you really want to do that inspires you such that you don't want to retire from it? If, as I do, you like engaging or really enjoy engaging with people, being a part of their lives, advising them on things that they otherwise find very stressful, which is money, then don't retire from doing that. If there's something else that inspires you, do that. But retiring by 50 does imply to me that you really hate what it is that you're doing. So don't do that. Do the thing that you're inspired by, and then figure out a way that you can make some money doing that. And then, as opposed to having this when and then thinking, oh, when I get to 50, when I get to 60, when I get to 70, I'll really enjoy myself then. Makes me think of cats in the cradle, but for a career.
Well, thank you so much for those answers. They were very helpful. I'm sure our viewers will enjoy it. Always nice to have you.
Thank you.
Up next, we will take a look at southern resident killer whales and years of food shortages. We will speak with Franny Couture, lead researcher and PhD candidate at the UBC's Institute for the Oceans and Fisheries. She looked at fluctuating salmon populations and the impact those had on the killer whale population. So stay tuned for more on this research after Forum Daily returns from the break. A new study from the University of British Columbia has found that southern resident killer whales have not had enough food for several years. Researchers found that fluctuating salmon populations had a detrimental effect on the whale's health, threatening what is already a small and fragile group. The study's lead researcher says the whales won't be able to survive many more rough years. The animals feed on Chinook salmon, but Chinook numbers have decreased, even as fishing regulations attempt to bolster them. That leaves animals high in the food chain without adequate prey. Joining us now to unpack this situation is Ms. Franny Couture, lead researcher and PhD candidate at the UBC's Institute for the Oceans and Fisheries. Welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you very much for having me.
Can you unpack the main findings of the study for our viewers?
Sure. So what we did in that study is that we tried to compare how much food did the southern resident killer whale need with how much food was available to them. And what we found is that they were in energetic deficit for 6 of the last 40 years. By energetic deficit here, we mean that the whales did not have enough to eat, basically, enough kilocalories. So an average adult human needs about 2,000 kilocalories a day. A whale needs about 170,000 kilocalories a day. And we found that for 6 of the last 40 years, the whales did not have those amount of calories.
So what are some of the causes for these fluctuating salmon populations?
So this is a question that still needs to be answered. We have several hypotheses on what is happening to the salmon population, but we know that it's probably a mix of those different factors. One of the reasons could be the predation by other marine animals that includes marine mammals, such as harbor seals and steeless sea lion, but that also potentially includes other animals that research is not focusing on at the moment. We also know that climate change could have an impact through the rising temperature of the seawater and freshwater water as well, and the prevalence of diseases for salmon populations as well. So there's potentially several factors that affect those salmon populations.
So have the attempts of fishing regulators to boost the salmon populations made any noticeable impact so far?
Yes, this is true. So the fishing restrictions started in the 1980s, and we observed really drastic commercial fishing restriction in the mid-1990s. But so far, all of those fishing restrictions have not managed to reverse the decline that we see in those Chinook populations.
According to the research, too, they say these whales have not had access to enough food for several years now, as you've shared. Why do you think this went unnoticed until recently?
I believe that it was thought that by many researchers that it was the case. Many researchers in Canada and in the US are looking at the body conditions of those whales. And what they found is that those whales have been getting skinnier. They've been losing their fat reserves. So it was highly hypothesized that this lowering in body condition was associated with a decline in food resource.
So,
but what this, go ahead.
Go ahead, no, go.
But what this study shows is that it could actually be the case that the whales have been hungry for several years, including the last 3 years, 2018 to 2020.
So in that case, what actions can be taken to help boost the food supply before the situation grows worse for southern resident killer whales?
So I guess before answering this question, what we really need to answer is what are the primary factors impacting those Chinook salmon population. And so far we have all those factors, but we don't know which one will be the primary cause of the decline for the salmon population. And more research is needed to determine what are the primary factors. And one, we will have the answer to that question. Okay, what can we do about enhancing the salmon populations?
Mm-hmm. So where can we find out some more information about the situation and about the study?
So you can find a lot of information about the Southern Residence Killer Whale on the Center for Whale Research website, which is an American organization in the Washington state. And then you can find this study online as well in the public library for science. And you can just access this study.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
Up next, after the break, we will hear from Catherine Murray, host of The Buck Stops Here. She joins us on Forum Daily to give us her look at the markets and the latest moves in the world of finance. So be sure to stay tuned as we will be back with more on the bears and the bulls. Stay with us. Up now, Forum Daily's weekly market update with Catherine Murray, host of The Buck Stops Here.
Thanks, Julie. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your weekly market recap. I'm Catherine Murray. Well, we are seeing upward momentum in North American equity markets today, with the Dow and the S&P up by about 1%. The S&P, in fact, is on track for 4 straight days of gains. And we're also seeing the higher beta areas of the market. So think the NASDAQ and Russell 2000 up by about 1.5% and 2% respectively. WTI, interestingly and importantly, is recovering from yesterday's losses, up by about 6% today. And that is also helping the TSX, which is trading up by about 1.7% today, following a 0.6% pullback yesterday. We're also seeing a broad bounce in the commodities complex, with copper up by about 3.5%. Semis are rallying on the back of strong preliminary results out of Samsung, really calming fears about downside earnings risks as we head into Q2 earnings season, which really kicks off in earnest next week. And with rates continuing to move higher today, banks are also seeing some positive gains. Now, although we are seeing some gains today, there's really no change in the market narrative, which is the push and pull between the bull and the bear case. The bear case, of course, investors concerned that the U.S. Federal Reserve will be unable to orchestrate a soft landing, cause a recession as they raise rates to combat inflation. We did receive the FOMC minutes yesterday, which were hawkish, meaning that the U.S. Federal Reserve continues to be aggressive in their quantitative tightening mode. The bullish takeaway, though, is that it seems to be working. Financial conditions are tightening and economic data is still good, but we are seeing lower highs. So a slowdown in economic demand appears to be happening. Perhaps this will lead the U.S. Federal Reserve to cool on the tightening mode, giving some floor to market valuations. Now, the market moving higher today is also on the back of policy support out of China. Recall, US and Canada and other European nations are in a tightening mode in terms of raising rates and pulling back quantitative easing, while China is actually offering monetary support to keep its economy growing. Specifically, China is considering allowing local governments to sell $220 billion of special bonds in the back half in order to accelerate infrastructure development and spending. China also announced a number of incentives to boost auto demand. Speaking of China, of course, investors are also watching very closely the doubling of COVID cases in Shanghai and the impact that has on economic demand in China, but also, of course, the impact that has on global growth. At the same time, Beijing introduced its first ever vaccine mandate. So perhaps that will help in terms of some of the cases and, of course, the economic impact. As we look at economic readings, the two to watch this week will be U.S. and Canadian jobs. The U.S. is looking for a gain of 250,000 jobs. This is going to be out tomorrow morning at 8:30. And Canada is looking for 25,000 job gains and 5.1% unemployment rate. Always important to take a look at the merger and acquisition activity. It does sometimes signal CEOs' view that the world is fine and they want to continue to invest. We did hear news that pharma giant Merck is looking to buy a biotech company, Seagen, SGEN is the ticker. It's a $40 billion deal potentially. So again, a lot of money being put to work potentially. And looking forward, the bull case in terms of the markets, inflation may have peaked. We have oversold conditioning or positioning. Negative news is known. The bear case, though, and why we might be in a little bit of a holding pattern here, and why we're really maybe just seeing some relief rallies, is earnings. What will the earnings picture look like next week? What will we see in terms of the actual results? Will it be better than feared? Will stocks rally on the back of that? And what will company management say? That's going to be key in terms of what they're seeing from a demand perspective and the input costs. Just real quick here in terms of the Canadian business news, RBC is projecting that Canada will be in a recession in 2023, but that the downside will be mild. We're also in housing seeing that Montreal is the latest to show signs of cooling with home sales and prices down in June. And also the CMHC said that Canadian mortgage debt has hit its highest level since 2008. Do keep in mind that we're also going to be watching very closely the BOC, the Bank of Canada, next week. It is widely expected that they will hike by 75 basis points, and the benchmark would therefore stand at 2.25%. A lot to watch. Jobs tomorrow and the BOC, Bank of Canada, next week. Julie, that does it for me. Back to you.
Thanks for that, Catherine. I'm Julie Stautland, and that was Forum Daily for Thursday, July 7th.